You remember that first bite, the one that made your whole world stop for a second. The candy was cheap, the wrapper was crinkly, but the memory? That stayed. You can still feel it on your tongue. That strange mix of sugar and childhood. You didn't eat those sweets because you were hungry. You ate them because they felt like joy in a world that made sense, back when every gas station shelf was a treasure hunt. When you'd dump your change on the counter and the cashier would smile because she knew exactly what you were after. Maybe it was a marathon bar that stretched longer than your hand. Maybe it was a packet of Bonkers that made your cheeks hurt from sour and sweet all at once. Or a Clark bar, dusty from the box but perfect in its crunch. They weren't just candies. They were eras. Every lost sweet carried the sound of laughter, the smell of summer, the hum of a Saturday afternoon when life felt endless. And one day, without warning, they were gone. Vanished from the aisles, replaced by things that looked the same but tasted like nothing. But if you close your eyes, you can still taste them. The old chocolate. The syrup. The sugar that didn't just melt, it meant something. Tonight, we're opening the candy box that time forgot. The lost sweets you wish they'd bring back. Not for the flavor, but for the feeling. Before everything came in plastic wrappers and barcode scanners, candy meant something simple. It was reward, escape, celebration, and comfort. All in one handful of sugar. Every corner store had its own smell, a mix of gum, chocolate, and paper bags. You didn't walk in for groceries, you walked in for magic. The bell above the door would ring, and behind the counter an old man or woman who'd known you since you were little would nod. You didn't need words, just a few coins in your palm and a glance at the shelf. That's where it lived, your favorite sweet. Maybe it was a marathon bar, long and twisted like a rope of caramel. Maybe it was a packet of Bonkers, those chewy squares that exploded with flavor. Or maybe you were one of those who liked a Clark bar. Crisp peanut butter core wrapped in real chocolate that melted if you didn't eat it fast enough. You didn't think about calories, or labels, or expiration dates. Candy wasn't a product. It was a ritual. The world felt slower then. You had to unwrap each moment by hand. The foil would crackle, the smell would rise, and suddenly you weren't in a store anymore. You were somewhere familiar, safe. One bite could pull you back to a summer that never seemed to end. Kids knew which store had the best prices. They'd ride their bikes across town just to save a dime. The glass jar of penny candies sat on the counter, filled with Tootsie Rolls, licorice sticks, and sugar buttons stuck to paper strips. And when you grabbed a handful, you didn't know it yet, but you were holding a piece of American history. Every generation had its flavor. The 1950s had malted milk balls and Bitto honey. The 1960s brought Smarties, Chiclets, and Necco wafers that clacked in your pocket like tiny coins. The 1970s? That was the golden age. The marathon bar, Chocolate, Wacky wafers, and Lick M-Aid. You didn't need a smartphone. You had a jawbreaker that lasted all afternoon. You'd open your lunchbox and see it waiting, that candy bar tucked beside your sandwich, already half melted, but still perfect. You'd trade it for baseball cards or keep it for the bus ride home, the one you'd stretch out as long as you could, because candy always tasted better at the end of the day. There was something honest about those old sweets. The chocolate wasn't smooth. It was thick. The caramel wasn't balanced. It was wild. Even the wrappers looked handmade, printed in bold reds, yellows, and browns, colors that felt warm, human. You didn't need a marketing team to sell a Baby Ruth or a Mallow cup. They sold themselves. People didn't just eat candy. They collected it. Kids kept wrappers in shoeboxes, flattened and saved like trading cards. Every brand meant something, not just to your taste buds, but to your memories. You remember the first time you tried a Charleston Chew. It stuck to your teeth, but you didn't care. Or the first Pop Rocks that fizzed on your tongue, making you laugh because it felt like magic. That wasn't just sugar, that was discovery. Every sweet had a story. The marathon bar wasn't just long, it was defiance. A candy that said, more is better. 8 inches of chocolate and caramel that twisted like a rope. Each bite stretching and sticking until you couldn't help but smile. The Chocolate bar, with its bubbly texture, was supposed to feel light, but it wasn't. It was rich, thick, and gone too soon. And Bonkers, the candy that hit hard. A soft chew that turned into a burst of juice, the kind of surprise that made kids giggle and parents shake their heads. Then there were the regional favorites, candies that only existed in certain corners of the country. Idaho Spud, Goo Goo Cluster, Sky Bar, Clark Bar. Each one had its loyal fans, people who swore by their flavor and mourned when they disappeared. You could measure time by what candy was on the shelf. The 1950s tasted like simplicity, hard candy and home. The 1960s were color and invention, everything bright, everything new. The 1970s were indulgence, chewy, sweet, wild. The 1980s were the end of innocence, the beginning of big brands, marketing, and mass production. And the 1990s? That's when nostalgia quietly began. When you started saying to remember when, because by then, so many of those candies were gone, factories closed, recipes changed, mergers and takeovers turned local favorites into forgotten footnotes. And little by little, the taste of childhood disappeared from shelves. but the memory didn't. You can still picture that one store. The one that smelled like sugar and cardboard. The one that had a fan spinning lazily on the ceiling and a candy rack that seemed taller than you. The way you'd stand there, trying to decide how to spend your last dime. The way your fingers would shake as you unwrapped the bar. The first bite. That taste that made everything else disappear for a moment. You weren't thinking about school or chores or the future. You were just there. You, your candy, and a world that still felt small enough to fit inside a wrapper. Candy was the first thing you ever bought with your own money. The first reward you ever earned. The first thing that taught you value. Not in dollars, but in joy. That's what makes those lost sweets so powerful. They weren't luxury. They were connection. They were the taste of being alive in a world that didn't need to be perfect to feel good. Maybe that's why, even now, people hunt for them online. They look for bonkers on eBay, order vintage Necco wafers, hope to find a Marathon bar remake. Because somewhere deep down, we're all still that kid in the candy aisle, looking for the one flavor that makes the world stop for a second. And every once in a while, you find it again. Maybe it's in an old-fashioned candy shop off a highway. Maybe it's a new company bringing something back. Maybe it's just a memory triggered by smell. Caramel, peanut butter, sugar. For a moment, you're home again, and that's what these lost sweets really are. Not food, but feelings. They remind you of who you were before life got complicated. The world has changed, but the taste hasn't. One bite and everything that mattered comes rushing back. Candy was never just candy. It was connection. A silent language between friends, families, and moments that didn't need words. You remember how it worked? You didn't just buy candy. You shared it. You broke it in half and handed the other piece to someone beside you. That single act said more than any sentence ever could. Every sweet had a ritual. You peeled, you unwrapped, you savored. The candy wasn't just sugar. It was ceremony. You could stretch a pack of Fun Dip through an entire afternoon, or let a root beer barrel melt on your tongue while you rode your bike home from school. There was a rhythm to it all, a kind of patience. You didn't scroll while you ate. You watched the world. You leaned on your handlebars. You listened to the hum of cicadas. You licked sugar dust from your fingertips. Life was slower. The candy made you stay still long enough to notice it. For kids, those sweets were tokens of freedom. A nickel could buy happiness. A quarter could buy a whole afternoon. You didn't need much, just a few coins and a little time. You'd walk to the store with friends, barefoot sometimes because the trip was half the fun. The sidewalk was hot, your hands sticky, your laughter louder than traffic. And inside that small store, behind the counter, was a world of color. Rows of chocolate, stripes of taffy, glass jars of gumdrops and jawbreakers. Every choice felt impossible because every option promised joy. When you look back now, it wasn't the candy itself that mattered. It was the people around it, the moments it carried, the small acts it created. A father stopping at a gas station after work to bring home a Clark bar for his daughter. A grandmother keeping a bowl of butterscotch on the coffee table that never ran empty. A friend sliding a pack of Smarties across a desk during a hard school day. Those gestures said, I see you. I care. Candy was shorthand for love. Even the way it was made back then carried heart. The recipes were simple. Sugar, milk, cocoa, corn syrup. No chemicals you couldn't pronounce. It wasn't made to last on shelves for years. It was made to last in memory. When you bit into a Marathon bar, the caramel pulled like a promise. When you cracked open a Sky bar, you got 4 surprises in one. Caramel, vanilla, peanut, fudge. You didn't eat it fast. You explored it. Bonkers had that playful burst in the center like a joke you couldn't get enough of. Necco wafers, chalky but beloved, made you choose your favorite color first. They were candies that didn't just fill your mouth. They filled your moments. You learned small lessons through candy. Patience from jawbreakers. Fairness from sharing a pack of Twizzlers. Gratitude from the one piece your mom gave you after dinner even when money was tight. And maybe that's why these sweets still live in the corners of your mind. They weren't just treats. They were teachers. They taught you that life could be sweet in small doses. That joy didn't need to be expensive. That happiness could fit in the palm of your hand. Think of how candy tied people together. Halloween nights when the whole town moved as one. Porch lights glowing, kids running, pillowcases filling. Every doorstep meant something different. Some handed out Hershey's miniatures. Some gave you popcorn balls wrapped in foil. And every so often, someone handed you a full-sized bar, and that made your entire night. That moment stayed with you. Not the candy itself, but the feeling. That warm, complete sense that the world was kind. You can trace family stories through candy. Your grandfather had his licorice. Your mother loved Mounds. Your brother always stole your Snickers. Each one had a preference, and each preference said something about them, not in words, but in taste. Candy crossed generations. The bowl on Grandma's coffee table wasn't just decoration. It was a ritual of hospitality. Take one, she'd say, even though you already had 3. The candy dish wasn't about sugar. It was about welcome. There's a reason people still keep those dishes around, even when they don't refill them anymore. It's not habit. It's heritage. The thing is, candy back then wasn't designed for marketing moments. It wasn't part of a campaign or an influencer ad. It was personal. It belonged to you and your life. The wrappers became keepsakes, folded and tucked away in drawers. You'd smooth them flat like memories. The colors faded, but the emotion stayed. You might find one now, inside an old book or box, the faded red of a Bonkers wrapper or the gold foil of a Clark bar, and your chest tightens a little. Because in that crumpled scrap of paper lives a whole season of your childhood. You remember waiting outside the corner store with your friends, trading pieces, arguing about which one was best. Someone always said, "You can't beat Reese's," and someone else swore by Milky Way. But deep down, everyone knew their favorite was the one they couldn't get anymore. That's how nostalgia works. The candies that disappeared took something with them. Not just flavor, but feeling. Because when those sweets vanished, so did a certain kind of joy. Small, simple, and earned. Now, candy feels different. It's shiny, uniform, predictable. The magic's still there in theory, but it doesn't land the same. The wrappers look the same, but the world around them doesn't. Back then, candy meant stopping. Now it means scrolling. Back then, you had to unwrap patience. Now it's instant. The sugar stayed sweet, but the world forgot how to taste it. But those who remember, they carry that sweetness like a secret. You can see it in the way someone's face lights up when you mention Bonkers or Zagnut or Chunky. Their eyes soften, their voice drops, and for a moment, they're not here. They're 10 again, sitting on a curb, swinging their legs, wrapper in hand. Candy was never just candy. It was a time capsule. It held laughter, warmth, and innocence. The kind that can't be recreated, only remembered. That's why the lost sweets matter. Because they remind us that the best parts of life are small, unplanned, and shared. You can taste a marathon bar again in your mind, even if your tongue has forgotten. You can feel the sugar crackle of a like M8 on your lips. You can hear the crinkle of cellophane in a quiet room, and in that moment, time folds. The years disappear. The world feels sweet again. It didn't happen overnight. One day the candy aisle looked just like it always had. Full of color, full of names you trusted. The next, something felt off. Your favorite bar was gone. The box was empty, the tag still on the shelf, but the candy never came back. That was the moment everything changed. The world got louder, faster, bigger. And in that rush, the small things, the real things, started to vanish. The local candy companies that once made their treats by hand couldn't compete with the big ones anymore. Mergers, buyouts, and cost cuts swept through the industry. The marathon bar disappeared when Mars decided it wasn't profitable. The Chocolate vanished when Nestle folded it into other products. Bonkers just stopped. No big announcement, no farewell. One year they were there, the next they were history, and no one thought to warn us. Candy wasn't just getting smaller, it was getting hollow. The ingredients changed, the recipes cheapened. Real sugar became corn syrup. Cocoa became flavoring. Everything that made those candies taste like childhood got stripped away in the name of efficiency. You didn't notice it right away. You'd grab a familiar bar, unwrap it, take a bite, and something felt wrong. The texture, the smell, the aftertaste. The candy had the same name, but the soul was gone. It was like running into an old friend who didn't remember you. The candy aisle used to be local. It reflected the people who made it. Each region had its own favorite. Clark bars in Pennsylvania, Goo Goo clusters in Tennessee, Idaho spuds in the Northwest. These weren't corporate creations. They were family recipes scaled up. And when those factories closed, pieces of America went with them. The shelves grew uniform. The small-town brands were replaced by global ones. Kit Kat, Snickers, Reese's, Twix, the same 5 or 6 faces everywhere. Well, you didn't realize it at the time, but something bigger was happening. The candy aisle was being rewritten. And in that rewrite, nostalgia became a casualty. The loss wasn't just flavor. It was identity. Remember when every gas station had a unique mix? Some carried Zagnut. Some had Skybar. Some stocked obscure regional treats that made you feel like you'd discovered treasure. That hunt was half the fun. You'd travel, stop at a rest area, and find something you'd never seen before. Now, no matter where you go, it's all the same. Uniform, predictable, boring. The death of local candy mirrored something deeper. The loss of local flavor in America itself. When everything got consolidated, so did culture. The candy aisle told the story of who we were. And when it changed, so did we. You can track it through time. The 1970s candy aisle was chaos. Wild colors, crazy names, imagination on fire. Every new bar felt like an experiment. The 1980s brought marketing and mascots. Candy commercials that sang jingles into your head. The 1990s? That's when the candy aisle went corporate. Safety replaced surprise. By the 2000s, the edges were gone. Candy became focus grouped, optimized, sterile. The irony? The world got sweeter, but the candy didn't. As old brands died off, their recipes vanished too. Some were locked in archives. Some were thrown away. The people who made them, the candy makers who knew every scent and step, retired or passed on. They didn't just make candy. They made memories. And when they left, so did that art. You might think it's silly, morning candy bars. But think about it. Those sweets weren't just sugar. They were time machines. Each one carried a story of a place, a family, a moment. And when they disappeared, part of that story went with them. Remember the first time you saw a Marathon bar commercial? That long chocolate rope stretched across the screen like something impossible. Or the bright Bonkers ads, the ones where fruit chunks fell from the sky and made people laugh too hard. Those ads didn't just sell candy. They sold joy. Now ads are sleek, calculated, emotionless. They don't make you feel anything. The day the candy aisle changed was the day imagination left the building. Even holidays felt different. Halloween went from mystery to marketing. Easter baskets stopped surprising you. Valentine's boxes turned into barcode gifts. Candy used to carry the fingerprints of the people who made it. Now it's made by machines that never taste. But the truth is, the world didn't forget because it didn't care. It forgot because it got busy. You grew up. The stores changed. The candies disappeared quietly, like friends who drift away. And one day, you walked into a store and realized that the candies that defined your childhood weren't just gone, they were erased. That's when nostalgia started doing what nostalgia always does. Filling in the gaps, people began hunting, searching for the flavors that once defined them. Online forums popped up where strangers swapped memories like baseball cards. Does anyone remember Chocolite? Whatever happened to Bonkers? Is there anywhere that still sells a Sky bar? And every time someone found one, in a vintage shop, in a limited re-release, in a dusty corner of a general store, the response was the same. I thought I was the only one who remembered, because these weren't just candies. They were proof that the past was real. Every wrapper rediscovered, every forgotten flavor resurrected, is a small rebellion against the idea that everything must move on. There's power in remembering. Because remembering means refusing to let something good disappear without a trace. And maybe that's why, even now, small companies are trying to bring those candies back. You can find new versions of the Clark bar. Sky Bar was revived by a tiny chocolatier in New England. There's even talk of Bonkers returning someday. It won't be the same, but it doesn't have to be. Because the point isn't to recreate the past. The point is to honor it. You can't bring back the smell of that corner store or the sound of coins hitting the counter. But you can bring back the spirit, the joy, the curiosity, the wonder that made those candies more than sweets. That's what the candy aisle used to be. A reflection of who we were. Imperfect, creative, local, human. And the day it changed forever wasn't just about candy. It was about us forgetting to savor what we had before chasing what's next. The lost candies remind us to slow down, to unwrap life one piece at a time. Because the sweetest things are never the ones that last forever. They're the ones that linger in memory long after they're gone. Some things fade. Others just wait. The lost candies, the ones we thought were gone forever, never really disappeared. They hid in memory, in whispers, in the quiet spaces between nostalgia and taste. And every so often, one of them comes back, reminding us that the sweetest things never truly die. You can feel it the first time you taste an old favorite again. Maybe someone found a box of Clark bars in a specialty shop. Maybe a boutique candy maker revived a Sky bar recipe. Maybe you ordered a Zagnut online just to see if it still tasted like it used to. The moment it touches your tongue, you're not just eating candy. You're time traveling. The flavor hits and the years peel away. The same sugar, the same crunch, the same feeling. It's all still there. The world has changed, but your senses remember. That's the power of taste. It's memory that lives in your mouth. You think about the candies that shaped your childhood and realize they weren't just treats. They were symbols. The Marathon bar wasn't just long. It represented abundance, imagination, joy without limits. Bonkers wasn't just a chewy square. It was the sound of laughter. The Chocolite wasn't just light chocolate. It was comfort in a simple form. Those candies are gone from shelves, but alive in hearts. They live in the stories we tell and the moments we recreate. When someone says, "Remember those?" and another person's eyes light up, that's resurrection. That's how flavor survives. You start noticing how the world quietly tries to bring them back. Retro candy shops pop up with glass jars and hand-painted signs. Online stores sell throwback boxes filled with names from the past. YouTube channels taste test old brands like sacred relics. And people cry, actually cry, because for a split second they're holding their childhood again. It's not about sugar, it's about time. Candy has always been about memory. The flavor, the wrapper, the smell, each one locks a piece of your story. When you unwrap an old brand, you're unwrapping a moment in your own life. The walk home from school, the store with the bell over the door, the friend who traded you for half a bar. It's strange how the smallest things outlast the biggest. Wars end, buildings crumble, cities change. But one taste of a Clark bar can bring an entire world back. That's because candy was never just made of sugar. It was made of place, of people and moments stitched together in taste. Think about it. Every candy had a creator, someone who believed sweetness could mean something. The man who invented the goo cluster in 1912 made it by hand for neighbors. The woman who ran the small town candy shop wrapped every piece herself. The workers in Pittsburgh who packed Clark bars took pride in every box. They weren't just doing a job, they were feeding happiness, and somehow that joy still echoes. Even when the companies vanish, even when the factories close, that feeling doesn't. It stays in the memory of everyone who ever tasted it. That's why old candies find their way back. Not through corporations, but through people. The ones who remember. The ones who care enough to bring them home. Sometimes it's a candy maker reviving a recipe from a newspaper clipping. Sometimes it's a grandparent teaching a child how to make fudge the old way. Sometimes it's just a memory, but that's enough. Because memory, like sugar, sticks, and it's sticky in the best way. The truth is, America's lost sweets never really belong to factories or brands. They belong to moments. They belong to you, the first time you earned one, the first time you shared one, the first time you realized something could be small and still mean everything. That's why we chase them now. Not because we miss the candy, but because we miss who we were when we ate it. Those candies tasted like childhood, but they also tasted like community. Like Saturday mornings and long bike rides. Like the hum of a fridge in a corner store. Like safety. The flavors that never die aren't just on the tongue. They're in the heartbeat. Every generation will have its own sweets. But yours, the lost ones, will always be special. Because they came from a time when candy was made with patience, love, and care. When it was personal. When it meant something. Maybe you can't find a real marathon bar anymore. But the memory of holding one, of stretching that caramel, is enough. Maybe Bonkers will never taste quite the same again. But the laughter it sparked, that's immortal. The world may have moved on, but every so often it pauses. You see a photo of an old wrapper, or hear someone mention a forgotten brand, and suddenly you're there again. 10 years old, sitting on a curb, sticky hands. Summer sun, nothing else to worry about, but which candy to eat next. And that is the flavor that never dies. So maybe that's the point. Candy isn't supposed to last forever. It's supposed to melt. It's supposed to disappear. So you can remember what it felt like. Because the sweetest moments aren't the ones you can keep. They're the ones that live only in memory, soft and shining. Like the last bite before the wrapper goes empty. You can't bring back every candy that vanished, but you can bring back the way it made you feel, with a story, a taste, a moment shared. And in doing that, you keep them alive, forever. The lost sweets of America may never return exactly as they were. But the memories they left behind are sweeter than anything you could unwrap. They remind us that happiness doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. If this walk down the candy aisle of memory made you smile, you'll love what's coming next. We're going deeper into the snacks, sodas, and roadside diners that built the flavor of America. And if you'd like to keep these stories close, join the newsletter, where we send one forgotten piece of the past straight to your inbox every week, because time moves fast. But the sweetest memories, they never expire,